This video today is going to be covering reading strategies. What do good readers do? Thinking about how we read is not something that we normally do, just the same as we don't ask, ourselves, what are our feet doing when we're walking? We have learned how to do it, and so therefore it becomes kind of second nature. So today's activity is we're going to be looking at what do good readers do in order to be successful in their reading. First things first, we're going to talk about metacognition. Metacognition is understanding what happens in our minds while we're doing something. So it's this idea of thinking about our thinking. So even if you do them, we just don't necessarily know when we're doing them. So this lesson should hopefully give you some clarity. Metacognition helps us know when we are doing something successful, and it also helps us know when we are not being successful. I have been in school for many, many, many years. And as I am about to go into my master's program, I need to be aware of when my mind is not necessarily comprehending the information as it should and how I can fix it. You yourselves have been reading for many years. And so metacognition helps us know when we've gotten into some troubled waters and how to get out of them. So the seven reading strategies that we're going to go over in this video are making connections, asking questions, determining the importance, inferring and predicting, visualizing, synthesizing, and using fix-up strategies. First strategy is making connections. We can make a text to self connection whenever we are reading a book or watching a movie or watching a TV show. Those are going to give us some moments where it seems like, I've seen that. There are some times where I watch a show and I think, that guy looks a lot like my brother. Or that character seems a lot like me. So, whenever we can find a way to connect ourselves to the story, it makes it more meaningful and we're more engaged. We can also look at the text and relate it to another text. So, maybe this book reminds you of a movie or another book or a TV show. Whenever we can make a text to text connection, whether it be characters or content or themes, it makes it more meaningful because you're building on prior knowledge. Finally, the last way to make connections is text to life. These are usually real world events that are outside of your personal world. Maybe you've seen it in your neighborhood, in your city, your state, the country, or the world. And so anything that reminds you of what is going on in history or in current events makes the books much more, or the text much more meaningful. When you are making connections, ask yourself, what do I already know about this topic? Has anything similar ever happened to me? How would I feel if this happened to me? Can I relate to the characters? Does this story remind me of something? When we make connections, it makes everything seem much more significant. We access our prior knowledge, those things that we used to know, and all of a sudden we're tapping into this story and applying that knowledge. Connect yourself to the text and go past the obvious. The second strategy is asking questions. First, always ask questions of what you don't understand. You're sitting at a movie, you space out for a moment, but you come back to the movie and you don't know what's happened. Something important happened while you were spacing out. Next person next to you, hey, what just happened? Those questions are going to help us stay on focus. But have you ever asked questions about what you do know? So oftentimes people think, oh, I don't know anything about this book. And then when they start realizing it, they ask questions. Oh, I totally know the answer to this. It's that so and so character. So what do you get? So start asking yourself questions. What's the main character? What was the main point of that chapter? Then there's words that we just don't understand. There are lots of vocabulary words in our language, and we don't use very many of them. So when we meet a new one, we can either choose to skip over it, which is not an English teacher's great wish, Or we can look it up or find somebody who does know. Sorry about that. Something else you can ask is, what other questions do I have? Maybe they're not comprehension questions. Maybe they are what if questions, or maybe they are questions about what's going to happen next. And then there's something called the wonder questions. What do you wonder about as you read? I like to wonder about things in the text. Like, for instance, I'm reading Jurassic Park and I wonder if they can actually make dinosaurs right now. Like, do we have the scientific availability? So that's a wonder question. Why do we ask these questions? One, we ask the questions because it keeps us focused on the text. We're engaging that conversation with the text and we are receiving, but we're also trying to put ourselves into that book. I use questions when my mind wanders. I get distracted so easily. And so these questions can help me stay on task and really figure out what's going on. And finally, if you run into problems, then these questions can help. Like, for instance, I often times have questions, but if I don't write it down, I forget about it. And then I show up to class the next day and I've forgotten what the question is. So if I write down those questions, then I can bring it up in class and get those answered. The third strategy is called determining importance. So we choose certain details that are considered the most important. These are usually the main characters and the plot lines, the moments in the plot that move it along. So think about what a teacher might ask on a test. We're not going to, if we teachers, we don't ask questions that are about small things like what is said on page 53. No, we usually ask what happened in chapter 3 to such and such character. So we think about big things. By the way, anybody who might be freaking out right now, there are no tests in remote learning. Also, think about what the author is hinting at. So, if an author is bringing up something at the beginning and then brings it up later, that was an important moment. That's an important object, an important phrase. And so, just pay attention to those things that show up a lot because those are considered important. We determine importance because we cannot possibly remember everything. You don't have to remember everything. We prioritize the information in our brain so that we can dump a lot and keep a little. It's really, really good for us readers not to feel like we have so much pressure to remember everything. The fourth strategy is called inferring and predicting. So, when we read, we're like detectives. We look for clues. We try to figure out what's happening. It's not explicitly stated in the story. And so, we're putting things together and trying to build a bigger picture than what the author is presenting. This is called inference. So, like, for instance, if I am a character and I say, I am the nicest character in the whole world, and then in the next page, I go punch somebody for no good reason, then that shows that the character is either lying or the author has not told us the bigger picture about why that person did something that seems very mean indeed. So when we make educated guesses about what may happen later in the story, this is called prediction. We're using these hints to figure out what's going to happen next. And so we look at things that are more likely. For instance, if I'm watching Jurassic Park, I'm probably going to see some dinosaurs coming up. If I see my grandma walking in a walker across the field in Jurassic Park, that's going to be a bit of a surprise. Couldn't have predicted that happening. So, predictions are based on what we've seen in the past and what we might see in the future. Ask yourself, what isn't stated? And that I've figured out. I think that person's pretty sus. I know I just said sus. Suspicious. What do I predict will happen? And why do I think that that's going to happen? Inferring and predicting is knowledge and text. The next strategy is visualizing. Visualizing is when we put pictures in our mind because the author has used these things called sensory details. These are imagery words. It's the seeing, the hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, slash feeling. Those are the things that the author brings to the page in order to bring it to life in our minds. We want to see and hear and smell and taste and touch and feel what the characters are experiencing so that we can get immersed in it. If we don't picture the events, we get bored. Trust me, textbooks are never fun. I can't draw a picture in my mind with textbooks. So it's very hard. So that's why I tend to doodle the images that are the information that's being given because it's easier for me. I'm a visual person. And the author's job is to paint pictures in our minds. So the reader's job is to visualize what the author describes. If the author spends the time painting the picture, we bring our own imagination to it as well. And also, why not? Because I like movies and I like movies in my mind. Second to last strategy is synthesizing. Now, synthesizing is just one way of saying that we bring things together in the end. And so at the very end of the story, we're going to synthesize. What does it all mean? So here are some things that we ask ourselves when we are synthesizing. What does it mean? Why did this author make this story? Isn't there something important that we could take from this? What's the big idea? What are some themes that we can get from this story? Is it about friendship? Is it about war? Is it about being nice to people? Sometimes at the end of the story, it's not wrapped up beautifully. They leave a cliffhanger. So, are there any questions that are still left unanswered? What happened to that character? Did they just disappear? What's going on here? Are there lessons that I should learn? Are there morals to the story? Is there something instructive that I should be taking away from this story? And finally, what do I think about this book? I read it, I loved it. I read it, I did not love it. You can have opinions because that's part of synthesizing. And finally, our last strategy is fix up strategies. So, when you are reading, you might run into some issues. You might not understand something. And so, we use these fix up strategies to figure out what is going wrong and how we can fix it. This is not a complete list, but this is some examples of how we can fix up something. We can reread the text. I space out all the time. I read a paragraph, have no idea what the paragraph was about. So I'm going to reread that paragraph and try to understand it one more time or two more times. I say underline, but what I really mean is it could be an underline or it can be a sticky note or you can write it down on a piece of paper. Either way, I'm going to figure it what I'm going to highlight that or underline it or put it on a sticky note because it's really not making sense and I need to figure out what it is. We find new words all the time, so maybe you use a dictionary. I know most people don't have dictionaries, so use things like online dictionaries. Or you can use context clues. I like to read my stories out loud. My favorite is audiobooks. Audiobooks are my favorite. So if you can read it out loud or have someone read it out loud to you, that makes it for a really easy time to be able to fix up maybe some comprehension issues. And then finally, ask for help. You've got classmates, teacher, parents, aunts, uncles, friends. You got a lot of people. You could ask them for help and they could really kind of guide you in the right direction. So, why do we use the strategies? These strategies create a plan of attack. When we look at a book and it's easy, it's easy. Trust me. But when we look at a book and it's not easy, then we need to use some strategies to kind of make it better, easier, and at least more successful so that we can understand what's going on. So, strategies help you learn how to understand. And if you know how to understand, then it's easier for you to understand things that are not easy. Easy is easy, but hard, don't want you to get stuck. So I want you to have these strategies in your pocket so that you can get over those hurdles. And when you think more deeply, you think more consciously, which means that you are aware of how your brain works and you are aware of how you learn best. Thank you so much for your time. My video is not working, but it's a Finding Nemo video. And I do appreciate you sticking around with my presentation. Remember that you may be using some or all of them already. So just make sure that you are um, thinking about your thinking and looking at your strengths and areas where you can grow. Thank you very much.